So, welcome to Healthy Chats with the Doc with Dr. Brooke Leverone. And today's topic is heartburn and GI. So, Doc, talk to us a little bit about heartburn and GI and where this comes from, kind of at a high level. And then we do have some questions, and we can start digging into that.
Yeah, so so digestive health, there's a lot of different elements to digestive health. There's a lot of different things that can go on when people are having disruptions in their digestive health. One of the most common ones is heartburn or indigestion, GERD. These are commonly used synonymously, these terms, but they are a little bit different. So a lot of people will struggle with being able to properly digest their food, and they will have a burning sensation that kind of comes up the stomach into the chest area, maybe even to the throat area, causing some coughing. This is called heartburn. This is also known as acid reflux. And what's happening is that your stomach is not, for whatever reason that we will get to, the stomach is not appropriately digesting the food. And so you're getting some reflux of the stomach acid, and the symptom of that is called heartburn. When you have this to a severe level and or a chronic level, we will call this gastroesophageal reflux disease, also known as GERD. So GERD is the official diagnosis, basically, of chronic heartburn due to acid reflux. So we kind of use the terms interchangeably, as you can see, like it's all kind of basically the same thing, but they're referring to different specific components. At the end of the day, it's discomfort when you eat something because of dysfunction in the digestive process in the stomach.
All right, that's a lot of acronyms and a lot of ways to talk about
right,
it.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the things, is how do you tell the difference between heartburn and something that might actually be a real cardiac event?
Right. So what can happen commonly, there's a lot of emergency room visits that will occur with people just having really bad heartburn and think they're having a heart attack. And obviously, if you're not sure, it's better to be safe than sorry and go to your local emergency room and get it checked out. But generally speaking, the heartburn usually occurs after you eat. Not that a cardiac event can't occur after you eat, but it's usually after you eat or when you're laying down. And it will be worsened by position change, such as like if you lay down or if you were to bend over, the symptoms will get worse in those cases. And it's a severe burning pain, and it doesn't come with other symptoms. So a cardiac event will come with difficulty breathing. The pain will be in the chest, but it will radiate out. You may have sweaty, clammy hands. In women, because in women it's a little bit different. We get those symptoms, but to a less degree. And women often will have nausea, lightheadedness, fatigue, headaches associated with that as well too. So the take home there is that with heartburn, you just have the burning sensation that is aggravated by position changes, and commonly after you eat or when you're laying down, especially after you eat, without any other associated symptoms. So when you have additional symptoms beyond the burning, that's when we're thinking more cardiac.
Yeah, that's good, right? Because I think a lot of times that you do hear that they don't know how to separate that, and people do end up in the emergency room.
Right. Yeah. And again, better to be safe than sorry, and just have it checked out if you're not sure. But that's kind of the guideline. If it's just a burning pain and it's not radiating out, and you're not having shortness of breath, and you're not like sweaty and clammy, and maybe having headaches and nausea and dizziness, then it's probably, if it's just the burning here, that's not necessarily chest pain related to cardiac. It's probably just the heartburn.
No, that's interesting. Well, and so then the other question.
Oh, and yes, if you were to
take one more.
Yeah, and if you're not sure and you take a Tums and it's better, then it's definitely heartburn, because cardiac event's not going to get better with Tums. So
that's a good point. So take a Tums, and if it's still not better, look at the other symptoms and go to them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. When in doubt, make sure you do that. Mm-hmm. So talk to us a little bit about, it sounds like heartburn, acid reflux, GERD. And then you often hear, especially with functional medicine doctors, the term leaky gut.
Yeah.
So does leaky gut have anything to do with this, or are they totally separate when you talk about GI issues?
They're totally separate things that are going on, but they can show up together. Leaky gut is not necessarily an accepted standard medical um, diagnosis in terms of standard medicine, because in standard medicine, if you have a leaky gut, you should be in the hospital because it means that there's a hole in your protective barrier allowing the outside world into the inside world. Because, right, the digestive system is technically the outside world, right? It's a hollow tube from mouth to bottom. And so it's technically the outside world, not the internal environment. So in the standard medicine, they'll think a leaky gut is a dire emergency where there's holes causing the outside world to leak in. But in functional medicine, we're basically saying that there is a dysfunction in the gut membrane and that barrier that is not just a protective barrier, but a functional barrier. What I mean by that is that that functional barrier of the intestinal tract is where we have our healthy bacteria that lives, that helps us break down food. It's where we absorb and take in all of our nutrients. It's also where we have immune regulation that occurs, and digestive function. We have short chain fatty acids, motility. So there's a lot of things happening at that layer of function. That intestinal membrane is a functional layer. It's not just a protective barrier, it's a functional layer that serves a purpose. So when there is inflammation in the gastrointestinal system because you are eating foods that you're sensitive to, that you have abnormal bacteria growth, maybe you have a severe like Crohn's or celiacs or something along those lines, an IBD type of picture. But when you have the inflammation in the digestive tract, it damages that functional barrier. And then that functional barrier no longer becomes as functional. And you can get breakdowns in what we call the tight junction. So every cell in that barrier they're very close to, like, you can't get between the cells on your skin, right? Everything's like interlocked very closely, right? So when we have inflammation of those interlocked genes, or excuse me, cells, and we have inflammation, things start to swell, and you do get some gaps. You get some little tiny gaps where when we're absorbing the food, we're maybe absorbing particles that are bigger than we're supposed to be absorbing. And that will trigger the immune system. The immune system's like, whoa, 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 whoa. We don't need this whole chunk of food. What is this? And then next thing you know, you're allergic to corn or allergic to gluten or you're allergic to blueberries, or broccoli. So the leaky gut is essentially a byproduct of inflammation in the digestive system causing compromised function of that functional barrier and allowing inappropriate absorption of larger food particles that are then triggering the immune system to create an inflammatory response, which further propagates that issue and causes you to then be sensitive to everything you're eating. And inflammation in the gut and food sensitivities can be a contributing factor to heartburn and indigestion.
Yeah, that
That
makes
was a
sense.
lot of information.
I'm like, whoa. Well, I mean, like, as a non-science person, so acid burning whole, it's like it just kind of goes with that. But so, talk to us then. Does that relate to like the microbiome then?
Right, exactly. So your microbiome, which is the healthy bacteria that live in our intestines, which is an integral part of our health. Like, we're learning so much about the microbiome. We know that the healthy microbiome bacteria helps to regulate not only digestion and other healthy bacteria, but it helps to regulate immune function and hormones and nervous system. And so when that microbiome is compromised, we will have dysfunction in a lot of those areas. We have dysfunction in immune regulation. So we get, again, further compromise of immune function and inflammation in the gastrointestinal system. We lose our protective barrier. So the microbiome also serves as a functional barrier. It's like the men on the wall, making sure nobody's getting through. So when that's decreased, that creates an environment that makes us more susceptible to abnormal bacteria, food sensitivities, and inflammation that can then continue to progress that process of degrading that functional barrier and contributing to the development of leaky gut. So microbiome and building a healthy microbiome is so important for so many reasons, but especially when we're talking about digestive dysfunction. And I mean, and that's part of the reason why we have digestive dysfunction is because most of us have a dysfunctional microbiome. And that in and of itself can be a cause of indigestion and heartburn. It's just an abnormal bacteria balance. And again, most of us suffer from that because let's face it, we've all had a round or two of antibiotics at some point in our life, and it takes years to replenish a healthy microbiome after taking those. And stress will deplete our healthy bacteria. And if we aren't eating healthy foods, enough healthy fruits and vegetables and fibers to replenish the healthy bacteria, then we can be compromised for that reason as well. If we're eating foods we're sensitive to, that can compromise our bacteria. If we already have abnormal bacteria in the gut and now they're fighting. And so there's lots of different things that can contribute to us having abnormal microbiomes. And so a lot of us, especially here in the States, have dysfunctional microbiomes, and that can be a contributing factor to the development of that leaky gut and that heartburn indigestion picture we were talking about.
Yeah, so I mean, I think you talk about microbiome, you talk about probiotics and some of those kinds of things. But so are ulcers related to what we're talking about here as far as, the microbiome, leaky gut, GERD, those types of things?
Yeah, the ulcers are kind of different and related. So ulcers generally don't. Ulcers can contribute to symptoms of heartburn. They usually have more of a lower. The pain is usually lower. It's usually in the stomach area. People will have, depending on the where the ulcer is and the type of ulcer, it'll be better before, be worse without food, better with food, worse with food, depending on the type of ulcer you have. But you tend to get discomfort, pain in that epigastric area, or, right at the base of your rib cage, right in the center where your stomach lives. That's usually where people are feeling the pain and burning sensation. Heartburn can come with that, but heartburn does not always mean ulcers. Ulcers are definitely their own thing, but heartburn can be a symptomology associated with ulcers. Ulcers are in the stomach and part of the small intestines that are due to commonly abnormal bacteria, specifically H. pylori, but it can also be due to inflammation in the gut from other reasons. The food sensitivities, deficiency in the microbiome, high stress is commonly associated with that, poor diet with foods that are really irritating to the lining. So a lot of other contributing factors. And then there's some genetic tendencies and other issues that can come into that. But those contributing factors can lead to the development of inflammation to the point where people are actually developing ulcers in the stomach area. And again, that H. pylori bacteria is also one of the ones that we commonly associate with the development of ulcers. And again, that heartburn situation, the symptomology of the heartburn can be associated with that as well too.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I've also heard that, I mean, there are, we'll talk a little bit in the time that's left in regards to what kind of lifestyle and diet types of things can you do. But I also, the question was, does your weight affect heartburn and reflux and GERD?
Not directly, but one of the reasons that people can suffer from chronic heartburn and GERD is what is called a hiatal hernia. And what that means is basically part of your stomach has been displaced above your diaphragm. And the diaphragm is what kind of keeps the door closed so that the stomach acid doesn't go into the esophagus. And so if part of the stomach then bloop, pops up over the diaphragm, if you will, then the diaphragm can't keep it closed to keep the stomach acid out. So some people can get heartburn from that, and that's called a hiatal hernia. So that's a structural issue, and you don't have to be overweight with that, but a lot of times people who are overweight can have that because of just the pressure that's put physiologically on those structures can contribute to the hiatal hernia. Often people who are overweight may have heartburn because of poor diet choices, and the poor diet choices is part of why they're overweight. And so that correlation. So it's not necessarily, there's not a direct correlation there specifically, like it doesn't increase your risk of having heartburn if you're overweight, in other words, but there are contributing factors and associations with being overweight and having heartburn.
All right, well, and that kind of relates to, we have a question from Andrea, is that are there foods that are more likely to upset your stomach? And, like, so let's talk about diet and, what kinds of things, and is that personal, or is there some like, are generically foods?
It's a little bit of both. So I definitely see people with food sensitivities will have heartburn as a symptom to foods they are sensitive to. So there definitely is a personalized aspect to heartburn and indigestion and GERD. And when we can identify somebody's food sensitivities and remove them, we often will see great improvement of their symptoms. I mean, that's probably the best advice that we can give you, is to find out what you are specifically sensitive to. With that being said, there are certain foods that have been found to aggravate and irritate some of that heartburn and indigestion. And that can be things like really spicy foods or really acidic foods. And coffee and alcohol are also commonly associated with the aggravation of heartburn. What's interesting is, I know we're running out of time. There's so much to talk about on this topic. One of the areas that we believe may be contributing to the development of heartburn and indigestion is that you actually have low stomach acid, not high stomach acid. And the reason is that diaphragm, when it closes the esophagus, when it closes the door, has several triggers as to when it's supposed to do that. One of those triggers is high levels of acid in the stomach. The diaphragm goes, oop, time to close the door, so that none of that acid gets into the esophagus. Because that acid, the stomach acid, is intense and the stomach can handle it, but the esophagus isn't designed to handle the acid in your stomach. That's why it burns. So one of the triggers for the body to protect the esophagus, ooh, acid's high, let's close the door. A lot of us actually have low stomach acid. And that's because we're under high stress. And if we're under high stress, digestion is shut down. We talked about this on a stress episode weeks ago at the beginning of COVID, I think, because stress. But one of the things is stress. If you're running from the bear, the body's not worried about digesting food, right? So it's going to shut down non-essential organ systems so that it can focus on running from the bear. In other words, your energy is not going to go to digestion under stress, which most of us are. And therefore, a lot of us actually are low in stomach acid. There's also some nutrient deficiencies associated with that and some other things. But again, due to time, that's the most common reason. So low stomach acid, that is very common most of us. And if the stomach acid is too low, then it's not going to be high enough to trigger the door to close. So supporting actual digestive enzymes and supporting the actual digestive process is key, and result is, in addition to the microbiome, the other aspect is you have to support natural digestion and natural breakdown of those foods with healthy stomach acid levels, bile levels, pancreatic enzymes, etc. That's the other key component of addressing heartburn and indigestion. And sometimes, lost you guys on Instagram, sometimes we can have, I'm apparently doing all the talking anyway, so it's fine. So sometimes we can have, I lost my train of thought. The stomach acid, when it's too low, in other words, which commonly most of us have, then you can get acid that's leaking through into the esophagus because the signal's not there to shut the door. And if we can improve stomach acid levels and digestive levels, then we have appropriate levels to shut the door. We have the appropriate ability to break down those foods and move them through the system so that they aren't just sitting there fermenting and churning in the stomach, causing indigestion and those other symptomologies. So I'm not saying go out and take a bunch of stomach acid. You definitely want to talk to a functional medicine doctor who can help you with that and guide you through what that process is. But I think that it's an important aspect to understand, especially when we're talking about what foods. So if you have low stomach acid and then you're saying, oh, don't eat acidic foods, which is true, it will aggravate the symptoms. But part of that is simply because there's not enough stomach acid to handle it. And that little irritation of an acidic food is enough to cause a flare. So like the tomatoes and the hot sauce. So that can be part of why that's happening. And then just in case Andrea was asking from the other perspective of like, what can you do to, oh, what was you said, upset your stomach. But I did want to address the fact that what you can do to treat your stomach is, oh God, there's so many things, but I really like throat coat and throat comfort tea. That's an easy, cheap thing you can buy at the store. Anybody can take it. And it has what we call demulcent herbs, which coat the lining and can soothe and heal and kind of help alleviate some of that symptomology. So, and that healing of the lining is really important for supporting the stomach health. I also like doing sauerkraut, which is really good for the gut health as well too. So,
Yeah.
I mean, again, we could go on and on about that, but hopefully this guide gives you guys just some insight on how the gut works. What are these different things? What are some of the causes? Definitely looking at your food sensitivities. If you're having symptoms and you need to take like a Tums, you know, go for it. The challenge with taking the Pepcid medications and those over the counter, you know, antacids is that your body does adapt to those antacids and it can be really hard to get off of them. So I try and get ahead of, I try and work with patients early on before they get on those medications, identify those food sensitivities, support the digestive function and process, repair the lining of the GI tract, improve the microbiome. And I'm telling you, it works. It totally works. Like, change your diet, do these other things. It works. You don't need to go on the antacids. And if you're already on them, it's fine, but it's a lot harder. It's a lot longer to get you off of them because your body gets kind of addicted, if you will. Right. And you get rebound heartburn when you try and come off. So it's really challenging, but you can get better. You know, there's much better options. And I could do a whole episode on just the antacids and some of the problems with that too. So
I guess in closing, yeah, no, there are a lot of lifestyle things you can do, but one of the things that they would be really good to do is to almost take like an own diary of and make notes of when your body is reacting to certain foods that you have. I mean, I know you do have food sensitivity tests that you can take. Yep. And the patients can come to you and take if it's chronic and ongoing. But one of the best things that they can do is come to you with, hey, I'm reacting to these foods, etc.
Right. Yeah. And try and take note. You can Google elimination diets online too. And that's a like self-test, an easy way to self-test. Are you sensitive to a food or not? Because it can be hard sometimes to, you know, because what if it was something you had for lunch that's not giving you heartburn until dinner, and then you ate dinner. And so sometimes it can be confused. I mean, usually the heartburn shows up right away, so we know right away. But if you want to try and identify if there's foods that you're sensitive to, definitely working with a functional medicine doctor and getting the test done is the easiest, quickest, most direct way to do it. But ultimately also doing an elimination diet for yourself and feeling how that feels to take away the most commonly aggravating foods. And then go from there and work on your, you know, when you take those foods away and see how you feel, then you're like, oh my God, that feels so much better. Yeah. And then you can try bringing them back in slowly, one at a time. And if your symptoms come back, boom, you've got the information right there, and you just saved yourself a couple $100 on a food allergy test. But it's also, it's nice to do both, because the food allergy test picks up things like blueberries and broccoli and almonds that I've seen people react to that you wouldn't necessarily think would be an issue, but they can be. But it's also nice because the elimination diet also allows for you to get a visceral feedback. It's not just on paper. You're actually feeling like, oh, that feels better, and oh, that feels worse. And that's very powerful when you're working towards managing your health and being, you know, proactive and feeling your best when you get that kind of data.
Thus, food is medicine. Right?
Yes, food is medicine.
Well, doctor, thank you so much. I know we've gone a little over, but thank you so much.
It's a heavy topic, hard to not go over on that.
I know gut health is a big deal.
Yep.
So we'll join you next week. And remember, soon we're going to have a password too. So I guess that's all part of Zoom. So anyway, take care.
Okay. All right. Thanks,
Bye.
guys. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We lost epigenetics there at the end, but I think you guys got the gist and all the good stuff on GI health and indigestion. And again, we could go on and on and on about all the different aspects there. So hopefully you got some pieces of information to work with today. Don't hesitate to DM if you have any questions or if there's any topics you want to hear about next. And we'll see you next week. Thanks, guys.
Bye.